Joining us in our booth this morning here at City Hall in Cape Town is the Deputy Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Mr. Steve Letseke. Mr. Steve, thank you very much for your time and welcome to Radio Islam International.
Thank you so much for the invitation and good morning to you and your listeners.
Good morning, and it's a pleasure indeed. South Africa continues to face a crisis of gender-based violence. What new measures are in place to combat this issue effectively?
No, indeed, of course, we have a big challenge. It's a scourge, it's a pandemic, gender-based violence that happens across our country, where we have in fact realized the 30 hotspots across the country where stakeholders come together now through our efforts in coordinated manner to respond to gender-based violence. But predominantly the biggest part is prevention of gender-based violence. If we cannot prevent gender-based violence, we cannot be spending so much money responding to it because it takes away from other priorities for that matter. But what we have done through the leadership of the President, it was the enactment of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence. We are actually at the end space of really finalizing the multi-sectoral establishment of the National Council of Gender-Based Violence. You would understand that it has 6 pillars, but one of the key elements is the rapid response team. That when a case is reported, what do we do and how do we actually link survivors of gender-based violence to the 65 Thuthuzela care centers that are across the country as one-stop service.
Now, many women, especially in rural areas, we're talking about entrepreneurship and economic empowerment. In the rural areas, they struggle to access economic opportunities. What programs are in place to support female entrepreneurship?
We have been working with a number of departments because you would understand ours is a responsibility to coordinate and mainstream. But departments such as the small medium business development, as well as Department of Labor and Employment, but also through our own agency, which is the National Youth Development Agency. We have actually taken a lump sum of the budget that is dedicated to us as a department. 70% of our own department budget goes to National Youth Development Agency, and 83% of the recipients are actually young women for that matter, which is quite important. But the collaboration that we do with the small business development has prioritized women enterprises, women entrepreneurs. The small business development takes businesses of women and even particularly also of persons with disability where they are, incubate those businesses and also empowers them with a grant, including the tools and equipment that they would be needing to empower themselves. And over this last couple of months, and over 50,000 people have been reached and have been incubated as well as have received grants to empower them.
Let's talk about youth unemployment. Youth unemployment remains one of the biggest crises in the country. How is the government, creating sustainable job opportunities for our young people?
Indeed, we have over 32% of youth unemployment. And if at all you add it up with those who are discouraged job seekers, as well as young people who are neither in employment, neither in education or training, it's giving us even much more a higher percentage. And that has been a crisis as you characterize it, you are right. But government has taken this as a priority, and through various initiatives from energy sector, mining sector, from public sector in creating job opportunities. You would understand that just from the presidential stimulus, employment stimulus program, which is part of the Operation Vulindlela, we have created youth employment opportunities, whether exposure into learnership, into internship, but also into absorption of formal economic participation as employment opportunities. But what we have prioritized really also is not only just looking at job seeking element, is how can we actually have much more young people create job opportunities. And I think brilliancy of our young people have demonstrated that they are capable, they are resilient, have shown that the education that they explore actually can benefit the country in terms of that. So we are not where we want to see ourselves as a country in regards to employment opportunities and economic growth. But once we have hit the nail with some of the programs, including the SANSI program that was launched by Deputy President, that prioritize the national youth service as an element of responding to youth employment, we will get there. We are not where we want to be, but we are hoping to really advance the response.
Deputy Minister, let's talk about persons with disability. In terms of accessibility, many buildings, schools and workplaces remain inaccessible for persons with disabilities. What has been done to ensure full accessibility across all sectors?
The incredible thing that we have done since we took office was to finalize the framework and the white paper on persons with disability. And that white paper speaks about self-representation, speaks about reasonable accommodation and access. And what we have actually done through working with partners, including Disabled People South Africa and many other associations, was to actually then look at both public and private sector, because the white paper and the framework speaks to both public and private sector. And that on its own is really trying to advance, really ensuring access and reasonable accommodations in place. I've taken up, visits across the country, both in KwaZulu-Natal as well as Gauteng, including here in Western Cape, and we are actually going to other provinces to actually see whether this is implemented accordingly. One of the key elements is really holding both public and private sector accountable. We can't speak about non-discrimination from the elements of our own constitution, but that is not exercised. We can't speak about dignity and integrity of individual, but that is not implemented accordingly. So our mandate is really to push for accountability and ensure that this white paper gets to be implemented wholeheartedly. But what has been one of the biggest gaps, it's really also ensuring that persons with disability also participate socially and economically as equal partners, as equal citizens in our country. And that has been moving in a very snail pace, and it really leaves persons with disability in a vulnerable element.
Finally, Deputy Minister, what key message would you like to send to women, youth and persons with disabilities following the President's address tonight?
Look, we are a government that is also moving with a nation that works for all. The intention here is to make sure South Africans are part of it. South Africans are not just recipients. And the message here is that a whole of society, women, youth and persons with disability, are central to the response, are central to participation of social and economic emancipation of our own people. So our message is that let us not be bystanders. To build a nation, it requires everybody. And to make sure that we succeed and we prosper as a nation, it means everybody must be on the table and do something about it.
Deputy Minister, thank you very much for your time this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.